Darwin is an open-source Unix-like computer operating system released by Apple Incorporated in 2000. It is composed of code developed by Apple, as well as code derived from NeXTSTEP, BSD, and other free software projects. Darwin forms the core set of components upon which OS X and iOS are based. It is mostly POSIX compatible, but has never, by itself, been certified as being compatible with any version of POSIX. History: Darwin's heritage began with NeXT's NeXTSTEP operating system, first released in 1989. After Apple bought NeXT in 1997, it announced it would base its NeXT operating system on OpenStep. This was developed into Rhapsody in 1997, Mac OS X Server 1.0 in 1999, Mac OS X Public Beta in 2000, and Mac OS X 10.0 in 2001. In 2000, the core operating system components of Mac OS X were released as open-source software under the Apple Public Source license as Darwin. The higher-level components, such as the Cocoa and Carbon frameworks, remained closed source. Up to Darwin 8.0.1, Apple released a binary installer after each major Mac OS X release that allowed one to install Darwin on PowerPC and Intel x86 computers as a standalone operating system. Minor updates were released as packages that were installed separately. Darwin is now only available as source code, except for the ARM variant, which has not been released in any form separately from iOS. However, the older versions of Darwin are still available in binary form, and a hobbyist developer WINOCM took the official Darwin source code and ported it to ARM. Design: Kernel: Darwin is built around XNU, a hybrid kernel that combines the Mach3 microkernel, various elements of BSD, and an object-oriented device driver API called IOKit. The hybrid kernel design compromises between the flexibility of a microkernel and the performance of a monolithic kernel. Hardware and software support: Darwin currently includes support for the 64-bit x86-64 variant of the Intel x86 processors used in Macs and the 64-bit ARM processors used in the iPhone 5s, as well as the 32-bit ARM processors used in the iPhone, iPod Touch, iPad and the second and third generation Apple TV. An open-source port of the XNU kernel exists which supports Darwin on Intel and AMD x86 platforms not officially supported by Apple, although it does not appear to have been updated since 2009. An open-source port of the XNU kernel also exists for ARM platforms. Older versions supported some or all of 32-bit PowerPC, 64-bit PowerPC, and 32-bit x86. It supports the POSIX API by way of its BSD lineage, and a large number of programs written for various other Unix-like systems can be compiled on Darwin with no changes to the source code. Darwin does not include many of the defining elements of Mac OS X, such as the Carbon and Cocoa APIs or the Quartz Compositor and Aqua user interface, and thus cannot run Mac applications. It does, however, support a number of lesser-known features of Mac OS X, such as mTransponder, which is the multicast DNS responder and a core component of the Bonjour networking technology, and Launched, an advanced service management framework. License: In July 2003, Apple released Darwin under version 2.0 of the Apple Public Source License, which is approved as a free software license by the Free Software Foundation. Previous versions had been released under an earlier version of the APSL license, which did not meet the FSF's definition of free software, although it met the requirements of the open-source definition. Mascot: The Darwin developers decided to adopt a mascot in 2000, and chose Hexley the platypus, over other contenders, such as an aqua Darwin fish, Clarus the doggo, and an orca. Hexley is a cartoon platypus who mimicking the BSD demon usually wears a cap resembling a demon's horns and carries a trident which symbolizes the forking of processes. Hexley was designed by John Hooper. Apple does not sanction Hexley as a logo for Darwin. The name Hexley is an accidental misspelling of the last name of Thomas Henry Huxley, a 19th-century English biologist who was a well-known champion of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The name was chosen under the misunderstanding that he was an assistant of Darwin, rather than a prominent biologist in his own right. By the time the spelling mistake had been discovered, it was deemed too late to change, and the erroneous name was kept. Release history. This is a table of major Darwin releases with their dates of release and their corresponding Mac OS X releases. Note that the corresponding Mac OS X release may have been released on a different date. Refer to the Mac OS X pages for those dates. The jump-in version numbers from Darwin 1.4.1 to 5.1 with the release of Mac OS X v10.1.1 was designed to tie Darwin to the Mac OS X version and build numbering system, which in turn is inherited from NeXTSTEP. In the build numbering system of Mac OS X, every version has a unique beginning build number, which identifies what whole version of Mac OS X it is part of. Mac OS X v10.0 had build numbers starting with 4, 10.1 had build numbers starting with 5, and so forth. The point release number in the Darwin version is always the same as the second point number in the Mac OS X version. In the case of Mac OS X v10.1.1, this was build 5M28 and the 10.1.1 release, from which a version number of 5.1 was derived. The command uname R in terminal will show the Darwin version number, and the command uname V will show the XNU build version string, which includes the Darwin version number. Derived projects. Due to the free software nature of Darwin, there are many projects that aim to modify or enhance the operating system. Open Darwin. Open Darwin was a community-led operating system based on the Darwin system. It was founded in April 2002 by Apple Incorporated and Internet Systems Consortium. Its goal was to increase collaboration between Apple developers and the free software community. Apple benefited from the project because improvements to Open Darwin would be incorporated into Darwin releases. And the free open source community supposedly benefited from being given complete control over its own operating system, which could then be used in free software distributions such as GNU Darwin. On July 25, 2006, the Open Darwin team announced that the project was shutting down, as they felt Open Darwin had become a mere hosting facility for Mac OS X-related projects, and that the efforts to create a standalone Darwin operating system had failed. They also state, availability of sources, interaction with Apple representatives, difficulty building and tracking sources, and a lack of interest from the community have all contributed to this. The last stable release was version 7.2.1, released on July 16, 2004. Pure Darwin. In 2007, the Pure Darwin project was launched to continue where Open Darwin left off, and is currently working to produce a release based on Darwin 11. There is a version available based on Darwin 10.5.8. This release has X11, DTRACE, and ZFS. Pure Darwin Nano is another release of Pure Darwin that is supposed to be minimalistic. Other, MacPorts, Think, and Homebrew are well-known projects to port Unix programs to the Darwin operating system and provide package management. In addition, several standard Unix package managers such as APM, PKGSRC, and Porter have Darwin ports. Some of these operate in their own namespace so as not to interfere with the base system. GNU Darwin is a project that ports packages of free software to Darwin. The Darwin project is a port of Wine that allows one to run Microsoft Windows software on Darwin. Darwin is a port of Trusted BSD Mandatory Access Control Framework and portions of the Linux framework to Darwin. It was incorporated into Mac OS X 10.5. The Darbat project is an experimental port of Darwin to the L4 microkernel family. It aims to be binary compatible with existing Darwin binaries. There are various projects that focus on driver support, for example, wireless drivers, wired NIC drivers, modem drivers, card readers, and the X2 and X3 file systems. See also AUX, MK Linux, references. External links. Darwin releases at Apple Developer Connection, Darwin build number list, Darwin source repository at SourceForge, Hexley, the Darwin Mascot, puredarwin.org,